Hello, I'm Helen Fu. Welcome to Health Factor. You've probably heard that public speaking is the #1 fear for most people. Did you know the #2 public fear is to be burned alive? That's right. Most people would rather die than to speak publicly. Our guest today, Tom Dowd, was a painfully shy and introverted individual until he joined Toastmasters. Today, Tom is the 2-time District 45 speech champion, a member of the National Speakers Association and the Global Speakers Federation. He's also a father, an author, and coach, teaching people how to overcome their fear of public speaking. Welcome to our show, Tom.
Helen, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So what is the secret? How can people overcome their public fear?
Well, fear comes from a lot of different places, and you have to realize what's causing it and then understand what you can do to control it, because we try to avoid it. And I think that's where people make the biggest mistake. You fix it by doing it more and more. You find a place to practice and to prepare and make sure that you know your material inside and out. What you're doing with public speaking, and this was the biggest learning for me, is it's not about communication as much as it is about confidence. And you want to build that confidence. So what I try to teach in my book, From Fear to Success, is that you're knocking off little pieces of that corner of fear every time you find an opportunity to speak. And when people say, well, I'm in a job, I don't have to speak to hundreds of people at once up on a stage, what they're not understanding is that we're surrounded by public speaking. What we're doing right now, take the TV out of it, is public speaking. Talking to the person at the grocery store is public speaking. Being a coach of a Little League team, public speaking. And when I started to realize that you can get to where you want to be with confidence by practicing, I found the wonders of Toastmasters were able to put me in a position to constantly talk when I didn't want to, and I started to knock those little corners off.
What made you want to join Toastmasters?
It was purely an accident made in heaven. It was one of those, I was a communication major in college, and I was told for 18 years at work at the same organization that I couldn't communicate. Interpersonal organizational communication, but I was told that I was defensive, I didn't listen, I couldn't put 2 sentences together. And then my company of 28,000 people was taken over. And we were taken over by an organization that grew us to almost 300,000 people. And I had this roller coaster ride of success. And I was in the wrong place at the right time on a couple occasions and vice versa. And what I found was that once I joined Toastmasters, and this 300,000 person organization was one of those places that said, we endorse Toastmasters. We know it can help you in the job that you're doing. And so I knew I had their backing. So I said, well, what else am I going to do? Because I could potentially lose my job if I don't get more confident, if I don't learn how to communicate. And by joining Toastmasters, I said, oh, well, maybe I'll just boost my resume and add it to it. And we had our first meeting 3 days later, and it's been incredible ever since. And I joined it for the resume boosting, but I found because of speech competitions and by learning the power of public speaking, it led to more successes one after another. I said, why would I ever want to leave an organization that's leading me to success?
So how long have you been a Toastmaster?
I've been a Toastmaster since 2008 with no desire to leave anytime soon.
Oh, great. Tell us a little bit more about Toastmasters. Some of the audience probably haven't heard about this.
Yeah, it's an organization that's been around for 90 years. And the methodology on teaching people how to speak hasn't really changed. It's a worldwide organization, 313,000 people spread around the world looking to improve their communication and leadership. And I think that piece gets knocked off sometimes. It's an and statement. Because you can't be a leader unless you can communicate effectively.
That's true.
And with this methodology, it starts with, we'll call them 10 projects. And you have to do these 10 projects. And it teaches you about knocking the little pieces of fear and apprehension away from public speaking. So you're going to start with a speech that's about you. Why? Because you're talking about something that you're comfortable with, that you know, And all of a sudden you start to realize, wait a minute, if I talk to people about myself and about things that I'm familiar with, I'm not as anxious. All right, well, that's a good start. And then we move you into how do you organize a speech, and you move through these speeches that take you how to use voice inflection, vocal variety, to using gestures and the physical aspects of the speeches, and it moves you all the way up to your 10th speech, which is a 8 to 10 minute inspirational speech. So it really teaches you to understand yourself first and moves you towards understanding the audience over time.
That's well said. I'm very familiar with Toastmasters. I'm a Toastmaster myself, so that's how we met. And I joined about the same time in 2008, and I loved it. I remember my very first speech in Toastmasters, icebreaker. It was scary, 4 to 6 minutes. And most people who went through that, it was different. Even though I was a teacher before, I taught a lot of workshops and presentations, but this is totally different.
Yeah, it is different. And I always get asked, well, I guess you're no longer fearful or anxious to jump up on a stage. And it's different now. I still do. And you'll find with actors and actresses and athletes, you get this feeling, and it's this weird feeling, the butterflies in the stomach, maybe even a little dizziness. But what might have been, and I say might have been, fear of speaking, has really turned into adrenaline, and it becomes this excitement. And it's this, I'm shaking with excitement to want to speak to the next audience, to share a message. Because a lot of us say, I get asked the question a lot, why are people fearful? And it starts with, let's say you're driving in a city you've never been in before and you don't have a map, you don't have a GPS. Well, you get this anxious feeling. And it's the same feeling you get with stepping up on a stage when you're not ready for it. It's new. But it also might be new and exciting. You're going on a brand new trip, you've never been there before. It's the same feeling, it's just a little bit more in control. But we start saying, well, I'm fearful of something new, so maybe I'm anxious over that, or maybe I don't want to fail. I don't want to embarrass myself. I don't want to embarrass.
That's probably the case. Most people are afraid of public embarrassment.
And they say, what if I embarrass myself? What if I embarrass my boss who gave me this assignment? What if I embarrass whatever it might be? What if I'm boring? And I tell people, stop saying what if. Stop asking the what if questions and say, or change them to say, what if you succeed? I mean, let's start with what if I'm boring? Well, don't be. Have material and content that are exciting, that people will thrive and want to hear from you. Have you ever been to a presentation? Hi, my name is Tom Dowd, and I'm your speaker today, and I'm really excited to be here. Well, the words said you're excited to be here, but are you really
show it.
excited to be here? And can you use emotion to get the audience's attention, to engage them? And so don't be boring, and be prepared and practice and keep working towards the thing. We can never be perfect speakers. And so I talk to people that are brand new as speakers, and I talk to people who are experienced speakers, who some of which have thought they've hit the pinnacle of where they need to be as speakers. And I'll tell you, what I try to teach is you'll never get to that pinnacle, but you need to constantly work towards it. It's important that we keep refining and honing these skills, whether it's through Toastmasters. And Toastmasters might not be the organization for everyone. I highly recommend it. But even if it's not for you, find a mentor. Become a mentor. Because as the teacher, I'm sure you found, you're also the student. And you start to figure out where your opportunities are, but constantly do it. And one of the things I'll teach people is write. Keep writing. Whether it's, and I've written some books, but I started by writing speeches. And I started writing emails at work, and I'm starting to find that emails are really easy to write at work. I'm not spending 20 minutes looking for typos and saying, is my boss going to like this email? Because it's a confidence factor, and that's what speaking and writing and communication, they all come together towards that communication and leadership pieces which lead to success.
So in Toastmasters, actually, there are two tracks. A lot of people thought of Toastmasters, oh, just speaking club. Actually, there was a leadership track as well. People learn both to be a good speaker as well as a good leader. And I understand that you also take up some leadership roles in the district. And
Yeah, I've been an avid competitor in speaking, and I've really enjoyed the competitions because it's taught me how to prepare differently and to become a better communicator. But I felt like something was missing, and it was that leadership piece. So this year, I am the Division B governor of District 45, which means that I oversee 22 clubs in the state of Maine and parts of New Hampshire. And by doing that, it's a year-long role. And so I have 4 pockets or areas, is what we call them in Toastmasters, of clubs. And so an area governor oversees their local clubs. I oversee the area governors. And we spend time trying to figure out what we can do to make people better communicators and leaders. We do training. We do speech competitions. We deal with difficult situations that come our way. And the year's coming up in June. It's been an incredible year. And I've been in a management role in organizations for 20 plus years. So I said, this is going to be easy. No, it wasn't. And it was rewarding. It was challenging.
A lot of hard work as well.
It was a lot of hard work because in a corporate setting, leadership is a whole lot different than being in a community setting or dealing with people in multiple organizations that all have their own opinions. And it was great. It once again taught me the importance of listening, taught me the importance of partnership, and taught me the importance of living in successes and recognizing those around them for what they've done to the organization, because all that recognition builds up their confidence. They become better leaders, better communicators, and once again, it leads to all of our success.
I can relate to that. I'm an area governor, Area 7 governor, and I loved it. It's a lot of work, but also it's a lot of accomplishment. You really feel that you can change people's lives a lot of times, just by helping them with the communication part and the leadership part. I also know that you are a father. So how many children do you have?
I have 3 teenage girls, but that might be a subject for a whole different show. My oldest is 18, so I have 14, a 16, and an 18-year-old girls. And my oldest is going off to college next year.
Yes.
And it's going to be exciting and sad all at the same time. But I've always said that they have taught me so much more than I can ever teach them as their father.
So have you applied some of the technologies or skills you've learned in Toastmasters towards your role as a father?
I am a terrible listener. And I say that in the present tense, but I'm working on it. And apologies to my wife, because I'm really working on that side of it too. But, Toastmasters has taught us, it's not, and again, we think public speaking, we think stage, microphone, podium, but we don't think about the conversation when your daughter is struggling with something, or your child is struggling with something, and just sitting there and listening to them. That is communication. Or being confident enough to say, you can do this. We get so comfortable that, oh, well, there are children, and we can just influence them the way that we think they should be influenced. But again, they're teaching me. And there have been times where we've had yelling matches, especially with my oldest. She and I are very hard-headed and are set in our ways a lot of times. But you learn the power of communication. In communication, you have the ability to persuade, to influence, to entertain, to laugh. When they need a good laugh, maybe they're crying on your shoulder. Maybe they need that laugh that's there. And you learn to do that. And you learn, what's really interesting is the power of the pause. And just stopping what you're saying right now. And just letting it sink in. It's just this powerful piece of communication that we don't do enough. And that silence gives us enough pause to understand what's really going on, and then to be able to react quickly. And my ability to listen has gotten so much better. My ability to think more quickly on my feet. I mean, kids today, with so many things going on with technology, with communications, with so many things, they're quick thinkers a lot of times, or at least my children are. And it's helped me to think a little quicker on my feet to be able to respond or understand what's really going on around them.
So can anybody learn to be a better speaker? Is this like a born skill or a learned skill? Because some people say, oh, he's a good speaker because he was born that way. Is that true?
You ask the question, can anyone? I would say everyone should and needs to, regardless of where they are. Professional speakers have mentors and coaches. And it should tell you something, that everyone should continually work towards that. And can anyone do it? Yes, everyone needs to. And I've talked to many people that say, you know what, I don't need it. It's not part of who I am. It's not part of the job I'm in, the organization I'm in. I don't need to do that. I just sit behind a computer going all day. And I'm proof that it's not that you're born with it. My grandfather was the traveling secretary of the Red Sox for 30 plus years. He was in the public eye all of the time. He was a very well-known MC in Boston, and I didn't pick up on those skills. I had to learn them. My father learned from him, and he was very well-known in his organization for 25 years as doing a lot of HR work and a lot of presentations. And I guess because I saw that, it actually created me to be more introverted. There are other people communicating on my behalf. I don't need it. No, this isn't one of those put me on a couch, I'm talking about my parents. But it was one of those, I just didn't feel the need to do it. I've heard of them being such good speakers and communicators. I didn't feel like I was anywhere near that level, so I didn't do a lot of work towards it. And at work, it made me more defensive, more cynical, because when someone would talk to me, I did what I could to get the words out of my mouth as quickly as I could, just so I didn't have to deal with any type of back and forth conversation. I didn't want anything to do with bad news. I didn't want to deal with a challenge at work. I just wanted information out of it, because I didn't know how to persuade or influence or listen. And I just became defensive, which actually led me down this path to be cynical, which is what my first book is about, is how I overcame that cynicism. And so I am proof positive that you're not born with it. You have to constantly work towards it. And you do that with practice. You put yourself in an uncomfortable situation, and you're going to press yourself just a little bit further to knock that little corner of fear off. The more you do it, the better off you're going to be. And that's all I would tell people to do, is if they say, well, I'm not a good speaker, I don't need to. I'm going to say, well, you will need to at some point. There is proof positive that your communication, when it's effective, will lead further down paths of success. But you only get there by pushing yourself further out of your comfort zone. Sure, maybe you don't need to speak to 1,000 people tomorrow, but maybe you go to a child's book reading at a library, and you do those little things, and you're going to say, hey, this isn't that bad. And put yourself into those positions, not to be the greatest professional speaker out there, but to be someone that can put two sentences together and do it with confidence. You're going to be so much happier with yourself and so much more successful.
Nowadays, we see so many children, adults, some adults as well. They just, even though they're sitting next to each other, they're texting to each other. Is communication lost? Or what advice do you have for these children or adults?
Communication is evolving, and to have two children sitting there texting each other on a couch is probably their form of communication in their eyes. But that's where I think the challenge is for us. Anyone who's in Toastmasters and understands the power of the verbal word, the powers of gestures, the powers of what we're doing with our facial expressions, all of that leads to emotion and different forms of communication. And it's just one more way to blend it in. Don't take one over another, but put it in and bring it into the mix of overall communication. And so I try to teach my children the importance of verbal communications and the struggles I had through school and how to become a public speaker. You still are going to have to speak to your professors. Once you get to college, you're still going to have to speak to your guidance counselors in high school. You're still going to have conversations with that boy or girlfriend. And you're not going to be doing this all the time. Sure, that's one piece of it. But can you get past the communication of 140 characters on Twitter? And when you can do that and blend those together, you can move away, like I feel that I've started to, breaking free of this shy and introverted individual to someone who is in the present tense still shy and introverted, but someone who can have this conversation, something I probably wouldn't have been able to do 5 or 6 years ago.
You wrote 5 books?
I have written 5 books.
Tell us about the books. What are the books about? They're not all about public speaking, as I understand.
No, they're all, it started as a happy accident, like so many things do. The first book I wrote is called The Transformation of a Doubting Thomas, Growing from a Cynic to a Professional in the Corporate World. No desire to write, no desire to be an author. I've been told for 18 years I couldn't communicate. That includes not writing well either. And I was in a speech competition, and I lost a speech. I won that one by accident, too. I was in third place out of 3 people at my club level. I lost. Didn't deserve to move on. The top 2 people couldn't move on, so there I was by default. And that was a good lesson in taking feedback and doing something with it. That, long story short, brings me to the district final. So Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and the 3 eastern provinces of Canada put me in a position to be 1 speech away from the world semifinals. And I meet this guy. After I blew my speech on stage, I forgot where I was in the speech, and I lost. And I lost to this guy, and this guy comes up, and he said, "That was a great speech. It was fantastic. You should keep refining and honing those skills. Keep doing this. You've got a future in doing this." And I said, "Who, me?" And he built this confidence, and this guy ends up winning 3rd in the world that year. So he's a pretty good speaker, and he's done extremely well in his career. I got up enough nerve the next day to ask him to be my mentor, and he agreed. I was in heaven until an hour later when I win the door prize, which is his book and his CD.
Oh.
I have a 5-hour drive back from Canada. I'm listening to his CD saying, "Wow, what good stuff." I read his book the next day, and I said, "Wow, what good stuff." And he was in a school district as a vice principal, so all his lessons were with students. But I was like, I do this every day at work. I've got lessons at work. I went for a run, I came back, ran straight to the computer, wrote out the outline, and said, I want to be like my new mentor and my role model. And I wrote the first book in 6 months, had that published. The second one was on public speaking. As I was doing competitions, I was trying to figure out how to put something for other public speakers that is easily digestible. So I wrote that in a way of 1 to 3 paragraphs. And I wrote it that when people read this, as they mature as speakers, the meaning of each chapter is going to actually change as they mature as speakers. And that's how I think that one differs as a public speaking book.
Is that From Fear to Success?
From Fear to Success.
We have a copy of this book here.
A practical public speaking guide, yeah, and I was fortunate enough to put it on an audio book too, which was a great experience to add a little credibility to a public speaking
Actually,
book.
I've been listening to it, as I told you. I said, wow, this is good stuff, and I've heard so many coaches and speaking tips, but this is a very practical one. And so I loved listening to it. It's in my car when I'm driving, I'm listening. Good job.
Well, the third one was I lost my job due to cost cuts, so it had nothing to do with performance. And so I continued doing my professional development training and found that people, as I went from Maine to Boston to job-seeking groups and networking groups, and the book wrote itself. I'm teaching other people how to find a job when I don't have one. And it lent to this deeper conversation with people, and the book wrote itself. And the fourth one was a project I did with online training that turned into Time Management Manifesto. I've been teaching time management for 20 years, and I thought it was about time to finally put a book out on it. And most recently in April, and it's a great gift for Father's Day, it's called The Unofficial Guide to Fatherhood, where I was able to collaborate with 8 other authors to put together our own style and our own meaning of what children and what being a father means to all of us.
That sounds interesting. I'm looking forward to reading that book. If you have any advice to people who are still afraid of public speaking, they don't know what to do, what is their first step?
Yeah, the first step is to just do it. Put yourself in the uncomfortable position and understand that you're not going to die most of the time by doing that. And you say, hey, I'm still standing after this. Not everybody, but hey, I'm still standing. It's about stage time. It's about practice. It's about preparation. It's about starting small, possibly going to a library. It took 2 years before I practiced my first speech in front of my wife.
Wow.
It's 2 years too long. And I was actually walking out the door to a speech competition in Canada where the winner would go on to the World Semifinals. And I decided to practice a speech in front of her, and it was a speech about rescuing animals. And It's a 7-minute speech, and I practiced it in front of her, and I was so nervous I did the speech in 5 minutes.
You just kind of ran through it. How did you like it?
Well, I got so tongue-tied as I was going through it. There's a line in there that says millions of dogs and cats, and I was so tongue-tied, I said millions of dogs and a cat. And she burst out in laughter, and I knew from that point forward, if I could do it in front of her, I can do it in front of so many other people. And my lessons learned and now taught to other people is just put yourself into that uncomfortable situation. You're going to find it's not as bad as you think it is. And communication, public speaking, is more about confidence than it is about communication. You're going to find the apprehension you have, that roadblock, that wall you're building in front of you is probably a lot taller than than the reality is. It's not as tall as it is. And you can refine and hone those skills. You will gain confidence and you will make yourself better when you simply do it. Practice it. Join a Toastmasters organization. Become a mentor. Be a mentor. Go to a library. Just put yourself into those positions to do it. And I will promise you, and there's very few promises I make in life, the more confident you are, the better off you'll be able to communicate. And when you can communicate effectively, you will find success. It's right there in front of you.
So it doesn't have to be always about public speaking, because people say, you know, I really don't have the need to go to the public to speak. But it's also about communication, even in family, with friends, with spouse, with children.
Yeah, and so let's start with work. I was told for 18 years that I couldn't communicate very well. I was defensive. I didn't implement any of the feedback. I learned, it took me a while, but I learned through Toastmasters and others that I can gain confidence. And the first time my manager wrote, Tom's communication skills are his key strengths, was a day I will never forget. Because now I'm being told, hey, I can communicate, and people are now tapping me on the shoulder saying, hey, can you teach my managers how to communicate? Whatever those 18 years before were gone like that, because someone had confidence in me, because I gave them the confidence that the job was going to get done and that I could communicate effectively. When I started my brand new job and I was able to land a job 59 days after I lost one, I was in heaven. It was because I could communicate. It was because I could network. It was because I could put 3 sentences together. I could persuade and influence others around me, the hiring managers, to come out and say, I want to speak to you. I was fortunate enough to be hired at a very good organization, and my boss has instantly, through our communications, gained trust and respect for the work that I'm doing, and those have to be earned, but they can be earned very quickly if you can communicate effectively. And I did. So now I know he doesn't worry about me in a meeting. He doesn't have to attend a meeting with me to see how am I doing. He knows because he's confident in my abilities. And what a great place to be, that I can help him by not having him worry about me. He can have a conversation with me. We're speaking to each other as people, as employees, as people who can get the job done together, and we're not worried about boss and employee relationship. We're worried about getting the job done now, and that comes when you learn to communicate effectively.
That's well said. Well, Tom, thank you so much for coming to our show. That's great lessons. I think our audience would also appreciate the fact that they've learned probably a different perspective now about public speaking, not only about public speaking, but also communication and the listening skills as well. I hope you will try it next time when you have a chance to give a little public speaking, even in front of your spouse or children. Stay healthy. See you next time.